Hello and welcome to the Rogue Monkey podcast, the show that shares insightful stories to motivate, inspire and support you on your own journey through work and life. We've reached the final episode of our 8th season, and with our second birthday just ticked off, we would love to say a huge thank you for joining us. For our 64th episode, we're really pleased to be joined by an entrepreneur, endurance runner, author and international athlete. Mike Stocks, author of the captivating book One Track Mind, joins us for a fascinating conversation about his journey through both business and sport and some of the lessons learned along the way. Mike is a super humble guy and really shares some wonderful insights with us, and we've no doubt you're going to take a lot away from today's episode, whatever line of work you're in and wherever you are on your journey. Just before we start the show, we'd ask if you can give us a quick subscribe on whatever platform you're joining us on today, and after the episode give us a quick rate and review, as it really helps the show reach more people. As always, if you want to know more about the podcast or the team and want to speak to us directly, please drop us an email, hello@theroguemonkey.org. Okay, let's get into it and the finale to Season 8. Episode 64, Mike Stocks, exploring the extreme endurance mindset and the life lessons learned from 24-hour racing. Hello, Mike, and welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Hi, Kevin. Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Yeah, really good. Really excited to kind of explore your journey. Obviously, it's an exciting time with lots going on, but we'll come on to that. But if you can give our listeners and viewers out there just a quick introduction, I guess, to who you are and your headline journey so far.
Yeah, well, I suppose with who I am, it's always I suppose who I currently am is an athlete and someone who's just started a elite ultra running team. And who I guess was originally a corporate lawyer, who then went into technology, who then started some of his own companies, so sort of more an entrepreneur, and as I said, now doing stuff that's more sort of in my area of passion, sport, running, and also writing as well. So I've started doing quite a lot of writing as well. So it's quite a varied collection there, I think, in my history.
Yeah, a very kind of eclectic mix of things coming together there. And I'm curious as to how the whole endurance sport thing started. Was that something that kind of emerged early in your life, or is that something that you came to later?
I think like a lot of people, I got interested in running and marathons and things in my 30s, because sort of in the 20s, it was cigarettes and booze and near death from stress, work stress. And so dealing with that was, running was part of dealing with that problem. And then you can probably hear from my accent, I'm South African originally. I have lived in the UK for over 20 years. But if you're a runner and South African, the only thing that matters is a race called the Comrades Marathon, which is called a marathon, but it's actually 56 miles. So it's 90 kilometers. So it's 2 marathons and a 5K. And if you're South African and you run a marathon, people just assume it's because you want to qualify to run the Comrades Marathon. So I had to take that leap, which I did. I ran my first Comrades, and that kind of got me involved more in endurance and in longer events. And I just found the whole thing fascinating, both from a personal point of view, the performance elements, the training, but also just the mental side. And my first race didn't go well at all. And so what I learned from that and how I built from that just got me more and more interested in endurance. And then progressively through my 40s, I started getting more ambitious. And I kind of had this idea of trying to run for England at 100K. There's a certain race I was hoping to be selected for. And eventually I had the dream of running for Great Britain, which in an event called the 24-hour, which is basically running for 24 hours. Whoever goes the furthest wins, which obviously sounds pretty ridiculous and probably is, but it's also very, very tough. So sort of progression of becoming more and more interested in endurance, I think, through my own experiences, but also through just the learning more, listening to podcasts like this, listening to people who'd done unusual things and who'd learned a lot about physical and mental performance, and wanting to learn those things myself, and then also to be able to contribute my own learnings, I guess, to those areas.
So, did you find when you kind of started to go into this world in your kind of 40s that actually looking back, some of the endurance aspects to, I guess, your work, because anyone who's worked as an entrepreneur, founded a business, worked in those kind of spaces that you're in, they're not easy. And actually, you develop a level of resilience and a mindset that perhaps transfers quite well into endurance sport. Although at the time, as I said, smoking and drinking, you probably weren't thinking along the kind of athlete performance mentality. But do you find now that you draw back on some of those tougher times, especially when you were first getting into it?
Yeah, drinking and smoking is endurance of its own kind as well. But yeah, definitely. And and funny thing about sort of ultra distance, there's a lot of obviously mental strength involved, and there's possibly one of the greatest runners of all time, Yannis Kouros, said that something along the lines of life experience being so helpful for ultra endurance running. In other words, for being able to just keep going for long periods of time, because life experience of any kind, particularly difficult experiences, does just give you the ability to handle things, to know that to have mechanisms, means, techniques to get through the tough times. And I like to say it also turns you into an optimist. And by optimism, what I mean is just developing a belief that whatever you're going through or whatever is thrown at you, that you can find a way through and make the best of it. Doesn't mean everything's just going to be perfect, but optimism just meaning that I believe that I'll make the best of it and I'll find a reasonable result out of whatever comes my way. And I think the more you go through in life, the more that becomes apparent. And so, yeah, I think those difficult times starting businesses, definitely, because being an entrepreneur has the most incredible highs and the most incredible lows. So you have a phone call, you go, wow, great, it's all going to work. This person wants to buy my product. And then the next day, actually they don't, crashing defeat. Oh my God, everything's terrible. We're going to crash. We're going to lose all our money. So I think realizing you can come through those highs and lows and actually, life carries on and you've made the best of it, I think is very helpful in any element of life, and absolutely sort of endurance running being one of them.
So at what point did you start, because obviously you talk about it a lot, it's quite a personal journey. At what point did you start, I guess, trying to share that outwards in terms of actually putting pen to paper and ultimately ending up in writing the book? Was there a tipping point with that, or was that something that just happened, I guess, over time through osmosis?
The actual book itself, which I'm going to plug ruthlessly, One Track Mind, the book is actually happened almost say by accident, but not by accident, but it wasn't something I expected to do. But I ran my first 24-hour race, and it was around a normal athletics track. So basically running for 24 hours around this 400-meter athletics track. And it was an incredibly intense life experience, which I hadn't expected. There was about, I think, 57 other people involved in the race. And the crews that supported us had their tents and their camps around the side of the track. And there was this unbelievable sense of community and these amazing life stories going on the track. Everything from Jeff Oliver, the 87-year-old man, or 85 as he was then, who ran 77 miles in 24 hours in 19 hours of rain. Just incredible. To all these other amazing stories of these incredible humans that were out on this track. And as I said, the interaction of the organizers and the crews and the runners. Normally in a race, everyone just separates and goes off, particularly an ultra event. You could maybe not see anybody for 8 hours or something. Whereas here, you're all together, you keep passing each other, you see who's doing what. It's like a goldfish bowl in terms of everybody's race. You see them go through good times and tough times. And so at the end of all of that, I was the day after the race, and I just started writing down some of the things that I'd learned and that I didn't want to forget. And this ideas just kind of flowed out of me because I just really had something to say. And that became my book, One Track Mind. And initially, I had even thought it would be a business book. And some of the things that I learned and that we learned from our experiences and from endurance and extreme experiences are very translatable to business. But it ended up being just more about life and some of the things that it kind of brought home to me about life and about what's important, in life, going through that experience and being part of that community that I hadn't really appreciated existed. So yeah, it's just one of those things that sort of happened, really.
But it must have been, I guess, quite a powerful experience, because in terms of the actual getting it down on paper, because one of the biggest things about experience is they often just stay locked in your mind. And granted, we have a lot more perhaps digital media and digital ways of capturing things than we did previously, but generally speaking, that personal experience stays locked in your head, and it's something that you carry with you for life. So to actually then extract that and look in the deeper meanings of it and interact that with, I guess, different aspects of your life and pull that together, when you kind of finished it all, and they sent the first version of it through kind of all finished, and you read it back, what was the impact like of that, to actually, I guess, see it almost like from the International Space Station looking down going, wow, this is it, kind of all come together?
I read once someone, an author, saying that when you first read your own book, you're going to hate it because you're just going to go, it's not good enough. And I must say, when I read it, I had a positive experience, just because I thought, I'm so glad I've captured this, because even if nobody else ever reads it, this is stuff I might forget. I'm worried that I might forget some of these things, and I've actually got it here, and I can sort of hang on to it and maybe read it myself in 20 years time, or whatever it might be. So it does feel like capturing a moment in time. And yeah, so it's a bit weird, but it was actually a positive experience. Of course, you always think I could have done that better or that better, but I think, like anything, you can't just keep working on it forever. At some point, you have to go, it's finished. Here it is, it's finished. So, but yeah, it was actually a very, very positive experience. And I must say, just the experience of having this book out there has been amazing. Just the sort of the conversations that have flown from it, the people I've met because of it. Someone pops up somewhere in the Midwest US who's kind of, it helped them with something, or from other side of the world, and just these amazing random conversations and stories I've heard about that wouldn't have happened otherwise. So the whole thing's just been really, really positive, I must say.
It does almost feel like a domino effect, though, where you've gone through that experience of getting into the endurance sports world in the first place, going on that athletic journey yourself, capturing it, and then actually spreading the words and the other stuff you've done with people. At what point did those two things start to come together to go, actually, I've got information and support that I want to share with other people, but actually I want to use the sport I'm doing as kind of a vehicle for that, to get to the point now where you're launching this new team? Can we just kind of explore that from idea and concept of that emerging kind of to where we are now?
In terms of sort of the team and the message, and yeah, I suppose these things happen often by sort of evolution, really. I suppose I'm a big believer, if you just follow your passions. I mean, my wife kind of talks about it as sort of, if you're looking for where you want to head, she has this sort of concept, sort of acorns. You plant acorns, and you start building a number of different things, and you see what grows. And for me, sort of moving in the direction of endurance, of using of having things to say, and finding ways to say them, be it through a book or through a team or through engaging with the community, was something that sort of, again, happened by degrees. So first there was the experience of the race, then the book, which obviously creates a great platform. And then it's really a case of just sort of following that and seeing where it goes. And the team as an idea, and maybe I'll just give a little bit of background about the team in a moment. But the team, Hour 7, the ultra running team, was something that I thought about for about a year before I actually did anything with it. And that was because there were just a few bits missing for me. So I thought it was a great idea, but it wasn't all completely formed. It wasn't quite enough there to make doing it sort of viable, exciting enough. And then a couple of bits fell into place just from a conversation here, a podcast I listened to there. And so yeah, big believer in, if you open your mind to possibility and head in the direction of the things that interest you and excite you and that you value, that you'll find interesting ways to get your message across, and just to find really cool things to do. Because a lot of what I'm doing now with the team is just about enjoyment and fun and passion, and with the athletes as well. Obviously, we're a team it's an elite running team. We want to win races, but actually our ethos is about learning. So if we don't win and we learn, that actually is great. We're just going to do our best, and we're going to enjoy ourselves and find joy from what we do. Would it be helpful if I just give a quick sort of overview of the team and just what we're trying to do with that, or do you want to do that a bit later?
Yeah, and what I was going to say, and I think for a lot of listeners out there, especially if you're not from the traditional sports world, perhaps their view of sport might be looking through, if you like, the Goldfish Bowl and seeing it on TV once a year, once every 4 years, and thinking it's the athlete behind the block or on the track or whatever it is, and that's it. Whereas actually the nature of not just endurance sport, but so many different aspects of sport is that team of people around them. And obviously going on that journey yourself as an athlete and seeing those people around you, it must have been really interesting to go through that kind of year period of it being an idea to going, look, I know I need a team around me to do this. And I'm sure lots of other people do too, to actually then going, oh, there's a piece of the puzzle. Oh, there's a piece of the puzzle, to the point where you almost got the picture. What was that moment like, actually pulling the trigger and kind of going, right, I'm actually going to do this?
Yeah, it's both great and also slightly scary, I suppose, because okay, this is gonna happen. It's not just because it's easy having an idea and having all these thoughts. It'd be great if I did that, or imagine yourself doing something. But for any sort of entrepreneurial person or entrepreneurial moment, you at the end of the day, it's about actually action and doing things and just taking the next step that will get you to where you want to be. And for me, probably the moment when I was definitely going to do it, I called a friend of mine, Dom, who's my co-founder, and said, this is, we kind of vaguely discussed it. I just said, I'm going to do it. Are you in? And he was like, yeah, sure, why not? And then it sort of just, it kind of went from there. And yeah, that is a great moment. And, but getting to that point, I suppose I had already put, as you say, some of the pieces together in my mind. So, how am I going to do it? Where's the money coming from? And, what kind of expertise can I bring through people I know? Or what can we obviously afford to buy and bring in, all those kind of things, and who needs to be involved? And what's the concept here? Because the concept changed quite a lot over that year of thinking about it, from initially something where it was about some athletes, and yes, we wanted to give them amazing world-class support, so the kind of support that an Olympic athlete would get, because I believe quite strongly that just because your event is not an Olympic event does not mean you should not get the same kind of support in terms of physiology and psychology and nutrition that an Olympic athlete, a leading Olympic athlete gets. So that's what we're trying to do with the team. So we went from that to being something where we also thought we want to really engage with the science of endurance. So, and the science of endurance by with looking around the world and saying, what's the best things that are going on anywhere in any sport? What can we learn from them? What can we try with our team? And then what can we share back with the world? So we want to not just sort of implement best practice on endurance, but also do some of our own research, come up with new ideas, for example, for how to test endurance athletes. We want to contribute in areas like female women's endurance in particular, where there's a serious lack of studies that have been done. And and that was in fact the final bit that kind of dropped was, hold on, we can actually do something around the science ourselves. This is not just a running team. This is about learning, and it's about sharing learning as well. And that's when I got really excited. That was like the missing piece. And Dom, my co-founder, that he's also massively interested in those kind of areas. So it became a no-brainer at that point to just go for it.
So let's kind of explore then where we're up to with it, and I guess the launch, if you like, and actually now it's here, everyone's come together, the pieces of the puzzle are complete, if you like. Let's talk through what that actually looks like now.
Yeah, so we're starting with 6 athletes, and the idea of 6, it's not too many, so we can really focus, get everything right, give them the right levels of support before we start adding probably up to another sort of 6 athletes during this year. Half men, half women, and then we've got a fantastic group of expert advisors who are going to be involved with the athletes, and they cover broad spectrum of different areas of support. And so obviously everything from nutrition, mental performance. We've actually got 2 people involved in the mental performance side, and strength training, physio. We've got a partnership with Jamie Pugh, who is a fantastic physiologist who works with some of the best runners in the country, out of John Moores University in Liverpool. They've got an amazing lab facility there for sports science. So we're very excited about that, and getting our athletes in the lab and being able to work with Jamie on coming up with some really interesting novel protocols as new kind of ways to test athletes who are running for days. Sometimes it's very different to someone who's going to do 2 hours or 3 hours of a marathon. What happens to someone's body after 6, 12, 20 hours? These are the kind of things we want to try to understand and to feed back to the world. So we've got all that in place. And then we had our a filming session just for our website at Cheddar Gorge in the UK a couple of weeks ago, and it was just the most wonderful day because it was the first time our athletes, we had 5 of them there anyway, were together, and it was just this incredible kind of bonding experience. Everyone just got on really well. Everyone's just really excited about the whole project. So and now we launched literally just a couple of days ago, and it's about starting to get the word out. But for myself and Dom and Robbie Britton, who's our team manager, it's obviously now about sitting with the athletes and saying, okay, we've got all this great stuff in place, but how do we make sure we don't forget the most important thing, which is to deliver to the athletes and to help them do incredible things and to become better athletes. And so we're going to be doing that now over this week, and then starting to engage our experts and go from there, really. So yeah, it's really exciting times.
Well, without thinking too far ahead, have you kind of got let's say a 1 year and 3 year ambition of where it could go, or are you kind of going to actually let it evolve as it evolves, if you like?
There's a big part of it is letting it evolve. We do need to develop some sort of commercial elements around it to make it sustainable. So obviously that's sponsorship, and it might be other things. But so the sustainability, the long-term sustainability is important, and so there will be elements of that. But primarily, I think the key thing will be how many athletes we can work with. So we don't want to build it to a size where we can't actually help everybody in at the right level. Some of that will depend on the amount of sponsorship and other fundraising, and where all that goes, and how much money we get in. But we also think we will be able to help. Certainly, a big part of the vision is to help both certainly GB, Great Britain running, by working a bit with some of the GB ultra running squads. So if there's any way we can help them with what we learn, I mean, our runners are all basically GB athletes anyway, but certainly if we can work with some of the other athletes and help in any way, we'd really like to do that. Certainly, I see no reason why we wouldn't have teams in other countries eventually. That's obviously a much longer term vision. And apart from that, really, yeah, it's just, and also, very importantly, how we kind of develop our own science, our own learning, and how we share that with the rest of the world. So in ways that's kind of easy for people like me to understand. So I'm not a scientist, but I love the science. I'm very interested in it. So how do we learn something and then just make it accessible and digestible and available just for other people to use. We'd also love it if some of the things we learned went beyond running. So for example, if we can learn something really useful on endurance, can that apply to a firefighter fighting for 30 hours against a massive blaze? Can it be used by people doing double shifts in ICU? So is there anything that around endurance that could be translatable, that would help people in other areas of life? That would be another one we're very keen to explore. So there's a lot there, and obviously we can't do everything, but we're going to try. So.
It must be, it's an entrepreneur's dream to sit at the kind of crest of the wave in terms of technology and science, and actually bringing those things together where you are adding value, but also forging new paths. Because I think too often it's, and not being harsh on others, but it's relatively easy to follow in somebody else's footsteps and actually go, well, we've got this information, we're going to use it to make the best of our team, whatever it is. Whereas to actually kind of put yourself out there and say, look, we're actually going to go into places that have perhaps not been explored before, and we're going to tell everyone about it so that everyone benefits from it. That must be a really exciting space from a point of view of quite literally not knowing what's around the corner, and you might uncover something that could change thousands of lives in completely different industries. That must be really, really exciting.
Well, that would be obviously amazing. Yeah, the whole idea is exciting. It just feels like, you know, I mean, I've done things in the past where it's been interesting, but it's not. I suppose it wasn't really in my area of passion. Whereas this, it's both just interesting, it's fascinating, and there is, as you say, that possibility that we're just going to find something really helpful, and even if it's just things that add a bit here and there, it's interesting, and it helps people even just in running, or it stimulates conversations. That's going to be worth it as well. But yeah, we not knowing kind of what the future holds, but believing that it's going to be interesting and that it could be very positive is a very, very good feeling. And I think coming from a technology background as well, they're not an engineer, but sort of having been involved in quite a few technology businesses, you know, that's going to be quite helpful. It may be that you know, we identify something with a sort of technology angle, but you know, if we don't, that's also okay. And as a writer, of course, you know, I'm also thinking that we're going to the whole adventure of what we're doing is going to be something that I'm going to want to share at some point. And so yeah, there's certainly a lot to look forward to from this.
A bit of a broader question. I mean, you mentioned the word passion quite a few times now, and actually having had the experiences through the different work journeys that you've been on, and then through to your own athletic journey, and then obviously with the team now, what is your kind of reflections around actually, number one, seeking things that you're actually passionate about, but number two, actually applying yourself to them? Because I think a lot of people during all the various lockdowns we've had over the last few years they've either been on furlough, or they've had time where perhaps they wouldn't have had before. And they've started exploring that space of, well, what am I passionate about? What am I interested about? Having kind of now gone on that journey professionally, personally, and now with the team stuff, what's that kind of been like for you in terms of reflecting back and thinking about passion as something for all our listeners and viewers out there?
Yeah, there's a number of elements to that. I suppose at a work level and following passions, I think often that requires reinvention, and which is quite a big topic in itself. But so you know, if I look at my own sort of work journey, yes, Actually, when I started studying, I wanted to be a poet, and there wasn't much money in that. So my first year of university was law, English literature, geography, and psychology. So that's typical, not really knowing what you want to do. But actually, I wanted to, you know, drink beer and write poetry. And but anyway, I realized that wasn't really a good career move. So I went into law. And law wasn't really a passion. It was more that people always just said that I sort of had the gift of the gab and good in an argument, and you know, I found it fairly interesting. But it wasn't like I sort of woke up every morning going, "Wow, I love the law." But I went straight into corporate, and that was exciting. I was part of a startup, actually the first mobile phone operator in South Africa, which is certainly going back some. It's in the 90s. And that was exciting because it was all new. But once it wasn't, then you know, and the technology wasn't as new, then it became less so. But I sort of during that time, I eventually got elected to become chairman of this global trade organization of basically all the mobile phone operators in the world, and they cooperated on things like how to roam between networks, how to develop technology standards. So I ran that organization for a couple of years, we had members from over 100 countries. It was very international. And I had this sort of reinvention as a sort of a technology person through that. And then when that ended, I was only 30. It was during the technology boom in the 90s, where you could be very young and do amazing things. So I was only 30 years old that my chairmanship ended, and I went from being someone who spoke at press conferences of like 100 journalists or spoke to thousands of people all around the world, to someone who basically no one was terribly interested in hearing from, because it wasn't me, it was the position. So the position that had authority was the chairman of that organization. And that was sort of, I often actually compare that to a sports person at 30, an elite sports person who's has that crash, that massive change of identity. So at 30 or some point in their 30s, where they kind of say to themselves, is this it? I've got my whole life ahead of me. Is everything I do in future always going to be less than this? And I had that sort of major sort of identity crisis at around 30, much like a sports person would. And I had to sort of reinvent myself. It was coincided with moving to the UK. I'd met my wife, Jane, through that whole international part of my career. And it was really difficult, but I sort of did a bit of consulting deals, but I had no sense of who I was. And then I sort of reinvented myself over time as an entrepreneur with sort of a technology angle. And it was sort of a rebuild of my identity. And that lasted until, I guess this phase now, where it's, again, another reinvention to sort of become an elite sports person, because I ran for Great Britain first at the age of 50, which is the oldest in the modern era to do so. There's kind of this sort of bizarre sort of getting it the wrong way around, sort of a career early on, a career crash at 30, and then become a sports person at 50. It's quite unusual, but yeah, it has certainly given me an unusual perspective. But all of those things, all of those moments require reinvention. And so I think and all of those things, I think, actually took me closer to the things I was really interested in, and closer to my real identity and to who I was. And I think to reinvent yourself does take personal courage, and even if it's in small ways. And I mean, in my 30s, I was forced to reinvent myself. I had no choice. It wasn't I sat there sagely and thought, wow, okay, let me do this. I had to carry on and survive. But I think, the other thing I was fortunate with is that the people around me let me reinvent myself. So I have a highly supportive wife who would say, yeah, sure, why not start a running team? Why not go and become an athlete? Why not whatever? Because she's just that kind of person. And I'm very, very blessed to have that. And we don't always let people reinvent themselves, the people we care about, the people we work with. So I think that's a key thing in following a passion. And then also the other element you mentioned was maybe something in your life that you go, I've always wanted to learn French. I've always wanted to run or be fitter or whatever it might be, and how we apply ourselves to those things. And I suppose we've all done that, where we start something and we don't carry on. I just wonder if we ask too much of ourselves at the beginning when we do those things, and we think, if I'm going to learn French, I've got to be able to speak French in a year, or I've got to whatever, instead of taking those small daily steps that just get you to some end point. And I started playing piano about 5 or 6 years ago, and I remember, I actually talk about it in the book. It's like I sort of looked ahead and thought, well, it doesn't matter what happens today. In 10 years' time, I'm going to be able to be someone who plays piano. So if I have a bad day today, or I can't play today, or whatever, that doesn't matter. I'm just going to keep plugging away. And eventually I'll get to some point where I can do something with some competence. And that's a wonderful idea. It doesn't matter if I can't do it at the end of this year, or if I'm crap today. And I'm still plugging away after 5 or 6 years. And in 10 years, now I'm still probably throwing it out to another 10 years. But anyway, but I have that real sense that I just keep plugging away and enjoying it for what it is, that I will actually get somewhere. And if I'm also enjoying it just for what it is, instead of having to have a certain proficiency suddenly be the guy I go and watch it on the stage somewhere, just enjoying it as me for what it is and for how well I can do it today. It's a long answer to a short question.
It's fascinating though, because in the book you talked about how, like, mentally being able to approach a 24-hour race, and since agreeing to obviously have a chat, I've spoke to a few people about it in kind of my sporting circles, and we all agree it's insane. But actually reading the way you approach it through the book of talking about how you break it down into these small little chunks and actually not letting the overwhelming scale of what you're doing, like our kind of cynical response of that's mad, but actually you don't think of it like that. You approach it as a enjoying the process in little chunks. And actually it kind of, without prompting, looped exactly back to what you're talking about with piano there, of just doing it a day at a time and actually enjoying the process, and the outcome will kind of take care of itself. And the question I kind of had for you was, is there a trait or a single thing that's run through, I guess, your sporting business and life journey that's allowed you to get where you are now? But I think I've kind of answered that already.
Yeah, I mean, it is partly just that sort of just moving and just keeping going a day at a time. There's also, I've mentioned optimism earlier. I am just someone who believes that the future does hold interesting things. It holds difficulty as well, but that just by applying myself and putting stuff out there, good things will happen, and that I will be able to deal with the difficulty that comes along. And also that if you don't put stuff out there and you're not trying, then the good things aren't going to happen. So you absolutely just have to just say, whatever it is, I'm just going to take one step forward towards where I want to be. And then while there's movement, there's hope. I mean, it's kind of like I said, exactly that in the race. It's like in this race, while I'm moving forward, there is hope. It doesn't matter how ill, how sore, how whatever, all I have to do is keep moving forward, and then I will get to some kind of a positive end. And I think I'm fortunate. I've always had that. That doesn't mean I don't get depressed sometimes or down or whatever. But I think just in general, trying to sort of harness that general belief, not in wow, everything's going to be great, but that general sort of feeling that if I just keep trying, then good things will happen to me and will happen in the direction that I want. As you said in that race, in a 24-hour run, it was exactly that. I think I talked about doing that first lap. In the end, I did 633 laps or something. But that first lap, you could kind of go, oh my God, that's one lap, and I've got to do hundreds and hundreds more. That's terrible. You could go, wow, I've got my first lap. And I had this mental feeling of literally taking that lap and placing it behind me and going, great, look at that, I've got a lap behind me. And I had worked on these kind of things with a mental performance coach and stuff, which helps as well on these sort of techniques. But although that one was a bit of an invention, but it did help me focus on what I'd done rather than the enormity of what I had to do in the future, because that's always going to be a much tougher ask. And then you can go, well, it's impossible. I can't do it. There's too much to do. So rather look at what you've already achieved and pat yourself on the back, for it and keep moving forward. Really,
I really like that. And there's one more thing I want to ask, because I think being the kind of reflecting back, probably quite an egotistical teenager and thought I had it all figured out at 20, and then at 30 you realize you didn't have a clue, and then at 35 you realize you didn't have a clue at 30, and so on and so forth. Going through everything you've done now, so you've done the GB representation, you started the team, you've gone through these failures of getting into the endurance sport world when you first started it, having the entrepreneurial stuff and everything else that came with it. When you look back now, that kind of wisdom, if you had to bottle it up, what would you go back if you were starting the journey and say to yourself? Because as I said, I think every person, when they go through those various milestones in their life, reflect back and perhaps have a slightly different perception on things the further they get into their life. So if you'd cast your mind back right to the start, when you're actually just getting on this start of this journey, what would you go back and say?
I'd probably tell myself sort of a bit of what we've spoken about already, but just, I would tell myself, Mike, it's okay. You're going to figure it out. So don't believe in yourself and trust yourself. And you'll find out what the things you're good at, also by trying lots of different things. I suppose that's the other one. I guess maybe I would say follow the passion and whatever, but life isn't necessarily like that. I don't regret doing a job for a while where I could earn a reasonable living, and because that helped me do the things that I did later. I suppose I would also say just embrace the experience, because whatever it is, I mean, there were some very difficult times, particularly in my 20s, where I literally almost worked myself to death, and it was just so hard and so difficult, particularly at a young age, dealing with the responsibility that I had. Um, but I think just embracing those difficult times, and knowing that you'll find your way through it is something that I would have told myself. And knowing that probably as you mature, you do figure more things out, and that you will find the things that probably fulfill you in a more profound way. But actually, you probably have to do all the other stuff to find those things. It's not like I could have known at 22, okay, great, go become an athlete and start a running team. I had to do all the other things I did and have all those experiences to be the person who figured out what I want to do today. And in 20 years' time, it might be something completely different. We'll chat again and go, Mike, weren't you very interested in running teams? I go, oh, no, it's like nuclear science I'm into, or whatever it might be, who knows. But so I think that, but and also I guess I would tell myself just to engage with the difficulty as well, which I think I have done well, but with the challenge, because when challenging things come along, it's easy to try to avoid them, but to face into them and to make the best of them and to learn from them. And I've done that reasonably well. There's probably some times when I didn't, but I would probably tell myself that those moments will come, but face into them and learn from them. And that will be very helpful in later life.
Fantastic. Well, it's a lovely way to pull it all together, and we're obviously going to include the links to everything you're doing with Hour 7. The book, obviously, cannot recommend it enough for everyone to check out, but I think it's going to be really interesting to follow this going forwards, because I still think like we've only scratched the surface of where this project's going to go. So thank you so much for sharing some time with us today, and look forward to speaking again soon.
Well, thanks so much. Great fun. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you for listening to today's podcast. And don't forget, we've got a back catalogue of content that goes all the way back to January 2020, including fighter pilots, Olympic champions, TV presenters, and inspiring authors. We'd really appreciate it if you can give us a quick rate and review, however you're joining us today. And if you don't want to miss out on any future episodes, make sure you hit subscribe. Our community update drops once a month, and we've got some great guest content being added, so be sure to sign up for that. And finally, we're all about inspiring and supporting as many people as possible. So if you can share this episode with one person that you think would enjoy it, that would be really, really cool. Thank you again for joining us for another episode of the Rogue Monkey Podcast.